The rifle bay buzzed with the usual chaos. Metal clinks, half-shouted jokes, the scent of oil and gunpowder. No one noticed the woman in the corner. No uniform, no rank. Just a civilian badge and steady hands that worked without pause. Then everything stopped. Chief Logan Reyes, a Navy SEAL known for trusting no one with his weapon, walked across the room, quiet, focused. He placed his custom rifle into her hands and stepped back. "Let her finish," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. The chatter died. Tools froze mid-air. Even the music cut off, as if the room itself was holding its breath. No one spoke. Because when a SEAL like Reyes steps back, you don't interrupt, you watch. And that's when the truth began to surface. There are unspoken rules in every military space, not the ones printed in SOP manuals or barked during inspections, but the quiet ones, the ones that form in the hallways, settle into break room glances and dictate who counts and who doesn't. In the rifle bay, those rules were crystal clear. Operators got nods, banter, respect. They were the ones who'd been out there, who wore dust from places no one talked about and carried calluses earned under fire. Support staff? They got forms to fill out, badges with barcodes, and silence. Avery Blake knew exactly where she stood in that hierarchy, or more accurately, where she didn't. She wasn't part of a team, wasn't invited to briefings. No one called her by name. Most didn't even know it. To them, she was just armory tech, a civilian assigned through a third-party support contract. Her ID badge might as well have said furniture. No insignia, no patches, just a photo, an ID number, and a lanyard that didn't belong to anyone in the chain of command. And yet, the rifles noticed. The ones no one else wanted to touch ended up on her bench. Misfiring M4s, worn bolt carriers, scopes with drifts so bad they might as well have been paperweights. Some were dropped there out of frustration. Others were dumped without comment. She never complained. She just worked. The rifle bay echoed with the usual music of military life. Compressed air hissing, tools tapping steel, half-muttered curses at stubborn components. But her corner was quiet, focused, precise. Avery didn't move like someone unsure of her place. She moved like someone who'd memorized the anatomy of every platform in that room. Like each weapon had a heartbeat she could hear and steady with the turn of a screw. She'd match bolt carriers by feel, adjust trigger pressure down to the gram without needing a gauge. Her fingers worked with the instinct of experience, not instruction. Most never looked twice, but if they had, they might have noticed that the chokes she replaced never slipped again, that the scopes she returned were zeroed in tighter than factory specs, that weapons left in her care didn't just meet standards, they exceeded them. And none of it was by accident. What made Avery stand out wasn't speed, though she had it. It wasn't brute strength, though she never seemed to struggle with a seized barrel nut. It was her decisions, small ones, the ones that said, "I know what this weapon will go through. I've been where it's needed most." But no one asked her how she knew, because that's not how the system worked. To the rest of the armory, she was just the quiet woman in the corner, the one with the gloves and the rag, the one who didn't talk unless spoken to, who never interrupted, never volunteered, never stepped into spaces she wasn't explicitly told to enter. She didn't need to. Her work entered for her. And though most still didn't know her name, the rifles did. And soon, the people holding them would too. At first, the pattern was subtle. One of the SEALs noticed his rifle didn't jam on full auto like it had before. Another found his optic held zero better, even after a brutal desert drop test. A third commented offhandedly that his trigger brake felt cleaner, smoother, like it had been reforged by someone who actually cared. No one made the connection immediately. The weapons just worked better. But after the third week, even the quiet guys in the team room were comparing notes. It wasn't just maintenance, it was enhancement. Rifles that had quirks now ran like they were fresh off the line. Gear that had once been unreliable was now consistent under pressure. And there was only one common variable. They'd all passed through Avery Blake's workbench. No ceremony, no announcement. She never signed her work, never spoke up in briefings. If someone thanked her, She simply nodded and went back to wiping carbon from a gas tube. But the SEALs knew. It wasn't just what she fixed. It was how she did it. Avery didn't approach weapons like an armory tech. She didn't just follow manufacturer's specs or torque values from a laminated sheet. She worked with an understanding that went beyond training, a feel for how things would behave in the field, under stress, in sand, or heat, or water. She tuned gear for survival, not just performance. A fire selector wasn't just repaired. It was smoothed to click without a sound. A scope wasn't just zeroed. It was offset micromillimeters to match recoil drift in a certain stance. A barrel wasn't just cleaned. It was reseated with a shim that reduced heat warp during sustained fire. The kinds of choices that don't get taught. The kinds of improvements you only learn when you've seen a mission fail because of a trigger delay or a bolt that stuck one time too many. And yet, Avery never asked to be included in any mission prep. Never volunteered range notes. Never requested field reports. She didn't need to. She simply read the gear, like it told her everything she needed to know about the operator behind it. One of the younger SEALs, Davis, tried to corner her once during gear check. "Did you do something to my magwell?" he asked, tapping the lower receiver like it had suddenly become a puzzle box. Avery looked up from her bench, wiped her hands on a rag, and offered the faintest of smiles. "It feeds smoother now." Davis blinked. "How'd you know it was misfeeding?" "You tap the rear of your mags before inserting them. That usually means you're compensating for drag." He stood there a little stunned. She went back to work. Words started to spread, quietly but persistently, not just among the SEALs, but among visiting teams, armorers from other units, even logistics officers. They didn't always speak her name. Sometimes they just referred to her station. "Hey, did this go through her bench yet?" You might want to have the civilian look at that optic. If she worked on it, don't touch it again. It's good. And through it all, Avery said nothing. She didn't correct assumptions, didn't boast, didn't explain how she knew what she knew, because she understood something most didn't. Authority can be assigned, but respect must be earned. And in a world full of rank, badges, and orders, skill still spoke louder than all of them. By the end of the month, a few SEALs had quietly begun leaving their more temperamental gear on her bench, unannounced. No tags, no requests, just trust. And she never asked why. She didn't need to be told she was finally being seen. She only needed the rifle in front of her, and the lives it would protect once it left her hands. The MK-18 had already been through 3 sets of hands: a short-barreled rifle, compact and lethal, modified with custom internals and a hybrid gas system. It had all the upgrades money and black budget access could buy, but none of it mattered. The weapon was jamming randomly under stress fire. No electronic diagnostic picked up the issue. Even the lead armorer refused to strip it down again, muttering something about microfractures and not worth the risk. They parked it on the end of the bench like it was already dead. Avery noticed the rifle before anyone handed it to her. She always noticed. She could read the tension in how the charging handle sat slightly askew, the carbon buildup pattern near the gas key, the faint discoloration under the rail that most would mistake for normal wear. She didn't ask questions. She simply reached out and pulled it toward her tray. For the next 40 minutes, she worked in silence. The rest of the bay carried on, and for a while. Reyes stood across the room, running post-op checks on his gear, but his eyes kept drifting toward her corner. Chief Logan Reyes was not a man easily impressed. 20 years in special warfare. He had his gear guy, someone cleared, trusted, and battle-proven. He didn't hand his weapons to base techs, and he sure as hell didn't hand them to civilians. But there was something different in the way she moved. She disassembled the MK-18 like someone who'd done it blindfolded 100 times. Not methodically, but instinctively. She used a tool Reyes didn't recognize, a curved pick shaped like a dentist's hook, but finer, almost surgical. Her fingers worked like she was coaxing something wounded back to life, not fixing a machine. She wasn't just replacing parts. She was diagnosing by sound, by tension, by feel. Reyes stepped closer, quiet, watching. When she found the fracture, a pressure line forming near the gas block, she didn't even flinch. She adjusted the seating, reinforced the venting with a hand-filed shim, and reassembled it all in under 10 minutes. The weapon looked no different on the outside, but Reyes knew. This wasn't maintenance. This was field-level recovery, the kind you only learned if you'd been in the field and seen what happened when gear failed under fire. He didn't say anything. Not then. He just turned, unslung his own rifle, a heavily customized M4 with proprietary components, and walked toward her. She glanced up, startled for half a second. Then still, he placed the weapon on her tray, carefully, deliberately, and then he stepped back. "Let her finish," he said, loud enough for the whole room to hear. The sound of wrenches stopped. A screwdriver clattered onto a workbench. Even the music from the speaker above cut off mid-beat, like someone had pulled the power. Everyone turned. Chief Logan Reyes had just surrendered his personal weapon to a civilian contractor. And no one did that. A few soldiers laughed nervously. "Is he serious? She's not even cleared for—" But Reyes didn't move. His eyes were locked on her, not with suspicion, but with full, unwavering confidence. Avery didn't respond. She picked up the rifle, held it, ran her hand along the upper receiver. Then she set to work. There was no announcement, no ceremony. Just tools in motion, screws turning, components being stripped, adjusted, polished, restored. Her hands never trembled. Her face showed no emotion. But the tension in the room could be sliced with a bayonet. The entire bay had frozen in place, not because of who she was, but because of who had just trusted her. And that, more than anything, shifted the balance. When she finished, she didn't hand the rifle back to Reyes. She set it gently on his side of the bench, then turned away and, without a word, returned to the next weapon on the tray. Reyes stepped forward, picked up the rifle, and gave it a once-over. Then, nodded once to himself, and walked away. No speech, no praise, but everyone in that room understood what had just happened. He had trusted her, not because of paperwork, not because of rank, but because he saw what no one else had taken the time to see. That skill doesn't wear a badge. It wears silence. Later that evening, long after most of the bay had cleared out, the silence still lingered. Chief Reyes's act had shifted something, not just in the air, but in the minds of the people who'd witnessed it. No one said it out loud, but questions were being asked. Not about what Avery had done, but about who she was. Staff Sergeant Michael Granger had seen his share of anomalies in the system. 23 years of military service, most of it in logistics and personnel, had taught him that paper trails were rarely wrong, but sometimes they were intentionally vague. And what he'd seen that day, that level of confidence, the way Reyes handed over his weapon, it didn't align with the little he knew of Avery Blake. So after hours, curiosity got the better of him. Granger keyed into the personnel database from his terminal. Just a routine review, he told himself. She was, after all, working near classified equipment. The system should have logged her access, certifications, background clearance, the usual bureaucratic trail. Except it didn't. There was no record of boot camp, no MOS, military occupational specialty, no training schools, no certification for advanced armory systems, no civilian contractor history with Tier 1 units. Nothing that justified the kind of hands-on clearance she seemed to have. Just one red-flagging line at the bottom of her file: former SOTB armorer, retired. That stopped him cold. SOTB. 3 letters that didn't belong in public databases. Granger leaned back in his chair. Special Operations Team Black wasn't a unit listed in standard rosters. It wasn't referenced in briefings. You didn't request transfer to it. You were selected or pulled in. And when you left, you didn't talk about it. Hell, you barely existed. Most soldiers only heard whispers: black operations, off-grid deployments, gear that didn't officially exist, missions that never happened. To be a field armorer for a team like that wasn't just about technical knowledge. It was about trust, about living in the gray, where your decisions didn't just affect mission success, they determined whether people lived or died in the dark. Granger read the line again. Retired, not discharged. That distinction meant something. Discharge was protocol. Retirement from Black meant something else, something final, and not always by choice. And there were gaps. Her employment history had blank years, no clear dates of transition, no explanation for how someone with no certs, no school, and no formal military record had been granted access to a weapons bay housing Navy SEAL equipment. He clicked further into the encrypted logs. Her security clearance, level 3 above standard base protocol. That kind of access was typically reserved for senior defense engineers or intelligence liaisons. Yet here she was, wiping down rifles with no title, no uniform, and no explanation. Granger sat for a long time, staring at the screen. He knew better than to dig deeper. Files like this? You only get glimpses for a reason. Go too far, and the system either locks you out or makes you forget you ever logged in. He exited the terminal. The next morning, when someone asked him who she was, he just said, "Someone who's been places none of us want to talk about." And that was the last time he brought it up, because whatever secrets Avery Blake carried, she'd earned the silence that protected them. No one dared ask her about Kandahar, not directly, not even in whispers when she passed. But the story had drifted through certain channels, not official ones, but the kind that flow between operators late at night, passed from one tired veteran to another like the last drag of a cigarette no one admits to needing. 2 squads, dead, not because of bad intel, not because of enemy fire, but because something failed. A rifle jammed when it shouldn't have. An optic blacked out mid-breach, timing thrown off by milliseconds, which in combat is an eternity. The after-action report, if one even existed, was never made public. But those who knew said the problem wasn't negligence. It was trust. The gear had been prepped by someone with the highest clearance, someone embedded with the team, someone whose work had saved lives 100 times before. Her name had been whispered, Avery Blake, and then, just as quickly, it was buried. She disappeared from the circuit overnight. No transfer order, no disciplinary action, no court-martial, just gone. To those in the shadows, that meant only one thing. It wasn't just a failure. It was something no one was allowed to talk about. Maybe the mission went sideways. Maybe politics played a role. Maybe the gear failed because it was pushed too hard in conditions no one planned for. But the consequence was clear. She vanished. No more SOTB assignments. No more black gear. No more warfighter whispers of, "Give it to Avery, she'll fix it." For 2 years, there was nothing. Then one day she resurfaced, not in a high-level clearance role, not behind a secure terminal at a contractor facility, but wiping carbon from discarded rifles in a base armory. No ceremony, no announcement, just a barcode badge and a seat in the corner no one wanted. And she didn't protest. She didn't demand to be reinstated, didn't explain what happened, didn't correct the rumors that followed in silence behind her. Because Avery Blake knew the weight of her history, not just what she'd done, but what had happened on her watch. She carried it the same way she handled weapons, carefully, precisely, without noise. Some people thought she came back for redemption. Others figured she was forced into obscurity, kept close but quiet, useful but forgotten. There were even those who believed she'd requested it, that she chose the silence. Whatever the truth was, Avery never said. But her hands told the story. Every pin she reset, every spring she replaced, every cracked housing she stabilized. She rebuilt trust the only way she could. Not with apologies, not with explanations, but with perfect work, one weapon at a time. No one knew how much weight she carried, but those who noticed, those who saw the same steadiness in her grip that they saw in combat medics, in snipers who'd been under fire too long to flinch. They understood. There are failures that end careers, and there are failures that become a scar you wake up with every day. The kind that never heals, only fades beneath layers of quiet discipline. Avery wasn't here to reclaim anything. She was here to make sure no rifle under her hands ever failed again. The rifle Reyes gave her wasn't standard issue. It was his. Customized over years of deployments, hand-fitted rails, a non-reflective Cerakote finish, drop-compensated optics, a trigger assembly milled to exact pressure. It was as much a part of him as his call sign, a weapon built for how he moved, breathed, fought. And now it sat in front of Avery Blake. She didn't ask questions, didn't make small talk. She simply pulled it closer with both hands and ran her fingertips along the frame like a mechanic listening to an engine with her skin. To anyone else, it was a show of absurd confidence or arrogance. But Reyes watched quietly from the side, arms crossed, eyes locked not on the weapon, but on her hands. She didn't grab a scanner, didn't plug into a diagnostic port. She didn't even reach for calipers. Instead, she closed her eyes. Her fingers traced the gas block, then the receiver. She tilted the rifle slightly, adjusted her wrist, tapped the buffer tube once, listening for the way it bounced. Then she tilted the rifle back and slowly, deliberately, removed the upper. Silence in the bay. No one moved. Everyone pretended to be busy, but they were watching, every single one of them. She pulled out a curved hook, not standard issue, and gently slid it into the chamber. One twist, a click, then a pause. Her brow tensed, barely, and then released. She reached for her tools. Not a whole set, just two. A fine brush and a flat tool made from titanium, thinner than a popsicle stick. 10 minutes passed like seconds. She didn't struggle. She didn't hesitate. She just worked. When she finished, she didn't hold up the rifle like a trophy. Didn't announce it was ready. She didn't even look for rays. She simply flipped the weapon gently, rested it on a clean mat, not on her side of the bench, but on his, and stood up, then turned away. No words, no glance. She moved to the next tray like nothing had happened, but everything had, because Reyes stepped forward, lifted the rifle, checked the chamber, the carrier group, the sight alignment. He dry-cycled the action once, twice, paused, then nodded, just once, and walked away. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. The silence said it all. Behind him, something shifted in the room. A wrench dropped. Someone exhaled. Another technician just stared at the now empty spot on her bench, as if it had held something sacred. For the first time since she arrived, Avery Blake wasn't just the civilian. She was the one who touched the rifle Reyes trusted. And that changed everything. Operators who never noticed her presence now glanced up when she walked by. A few nodded. A few more didn't speak, but stepped aside when she passed, the way you do for someone who's been further than you ever will. That week, more rifles ended up on her bench, some with post-its, some with nothing at all. But every one of them had passed through someone's hands who now believed, if Reyes trusted her, maybe we should too. But Avery didn't react. She didn't gloat. She didn't bask in the attention. She kept her sleeves rolled up, kept her gloves tight, kept her focus locked on the next weapon in front of her. Because this small moment of recognition, wasn't what she came back for. It wasn't about redemption. It wasn't even about respect. It was about making sure no operator ever lost a teammate because of a failure she could have prevented. So when the silence fell again, this time not out of shock, but out of shared reverence, she let it happen. And then she worked. The sound of metal returned, but now it carried a different tone. Because after that moment, every tool turned, every bolt tightened, every breath held during a dry fire check carried an unspoken truth. The woman in the corner didn't need a nameplate. She already had what mattered more: trust. A week later, the rifle bay returned to its rhythm. Or so it seemed. Tools still clinked. Chatter still rose and fell. Music still leaked from an old speaker in the corner. But something had changed, not in the noise, in the silence. People looked differently now, not at each other, but at her. Avery Blake hadn't changed anything about herself. Same corner, same gloves, same quiet precision. She didn't carry a new badge. No one gave her a new title. But the way others moved around her, slower, more intentional. The way they waited before interrupting, the way they left weapons on her bench with a quiet nod instead of an order. Respect had arrived, not loudly, but permanently. Then one morning it appeared. At first glance, it was just another rack. A custom gun stand made of dark walnut wood, reinforced with polished brackets and velvet-lined grooves. Set in the far left corner of the bay, just outside the high traffic area. It was elegant without being showy, solid without calling attention. But what sat on it said everything. Chief Reyes's rifle, the one she had restored, the one no one was ever allowed to touch until her. It lay there like a tribute, not to firepower, not to customization, but to trust. And beneath it, affixed to the wood in clean, etched brass, was a small plaque. Just 3 words. Let her finish. No name, no rank, no unit insignia, no explanation. And that was the point. It wasn't about honoring a person. It was about remembering a moment. The exact second when a room full of trained operators stopped judging and started watching. When skill overwhelmed assumption. When quiet outshone noise. Some didn't get it. New arrivals occasionally asked what the display was for, and every time the answer was the same. Just a reminder. A reminder that some of the most vital hands in the room don't raise their voices. A reminder that sometimes the best leadership is to step back. And a reminder that respect isn't demanded, it's demonstrated. Avery never approached the rack, never mentioned it. She just kept working, restoring broken firing pins, adjusting worn gas rings, cleaning triggers others thought were beyond saving. But every now and then, someone would catch her glancing toward it, just for a second, not for recognition, but as if anchoring herself to a moment that said, "You are seen, you are trusted, and you are still needed." And that was enough. She didn't need a promotion, didn't need her photo on a wall. All she needed was the space to do what she did best. And that small brass plate, it said everything the ranks never did. She never moved benches, still sat in the far corner, under the same flickering light, at the same scarred steel table, with the same battered toolbox she brought on her first day. No one gave her a better seat. She never asked for one. She didn't need it. Avery Blake remained who she'd always been, the woman who didn't wear a name tag, didn't stand in line for praise, didn't interrupt meetings to prove she belonged. But now the room noticed, not because of a story, few knew the whole thing, not because of Rhea's endorsement, he never spoke about that moment again, but because trust leaves a scent, and in that bay, they all smelled it. When gear malfunctioned, they didn't bring it to the front desk. They walked straight to her, no clipboard, no form, just a nod and a quiet, "Can you look at this?" And she would. No questions, no fanfare, just the sound of tools being picked up, and something broken becoming whole again. You see, not all recognition comes with applause. Some comes in silence, in how people wait for you to finish speaking or working and before they move, in how they stand behind you, not in front of you, in how, when things go wrong, they come looking for you first because no one else will do. Avery never asked for anything more than a place to sit, a weapon to fix, and a moment of focus. And in the end, that's exactly what she got. The woman in the corner stayed in the corner, but now when soldiers walked past, they didn't ignore her. They nodded, not out of habit, but out of respect. And in a world full of noise, orders, and rank, that quiet nod meant more than any medal ever could. In the end, maybe this story isn't just about weapons or war. Maybe it's about the quiet professionals among us, the ones who don't wear uniforms, don't demand applause, but still carry the weight of responsibility in everything they do. Avery Blake reminds us of something many have forgotten, that dignity doesn't need to speak loudly, that true expertise often comes wrapped in humility, and that sometimes the most dependable hands are the ones no one's watching, until everything depends on them. In today's world where titles, noise, and recognition dominate our screens, there's something profoundly American about earning respect through action, not appearance. Whether you're a veteran, a teacher, a caregiver, or just someone quietly doing your best, your value isn't measured by who sees you, but by what you build when no one's looking. So here's a question I'd love to hear your thoughts on. Have you ever met someone like Avery? Someone overlooked, yet unforgettable, once you saw what they could do? Or maybe you've been that person, working in the background, caring more than anyone knows. Share your stories in the comments. I read everyone, especially from those of you who've lived long enough to know that real strength rarely needs to shout. If this story meant something to you, I'd be honored if you'd like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who still believes in quiet courage. Thank you for listening. Until next time, keep building quietly.